The world is not falling apart. It is being rearranged.
Yeah, that is quite the statement to kick things off with. It really just forces you to, take a step back from the daily panic.
It totally does. And it sets the tone perfectly for what we're getting into today. For this deep dive, we're pulling from a single, honestly incredibly provocative source that one of you, our listeners, sent our way.
Right, and it reads almost like a modern manifesto on the changing nature of global power. It's short, it's punchy, and, honestly, it's a little unsettling.
Very unsettling. But that's exactly why we're looking at it. Our mission today is to decode this text. We're going to unpack the claim that real power has, well, secretly shifted away from the traditional governments we usually focus on.
Exactly, relocated into these invisible, borderless networks.
Right. And more importantly, we're going to map out exactly how you can reclaim your own agency in the middle of all this noise.
Because to do that, it requires a complete reset of perspective. To understand the mechanics this text outlines, you got to question the basic structures of authority we've all been taught since grade school.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the loudest thing in the room, which is politics. We are fundamentally taught that power belongs to governments.
Right. Yeah.
Like, we learn that nations, physical borders, elections, leaders, they're the absolute center of the geopolitical universe. But I want to push on this premise from the text.
Go for it.
The source claims traditional governments are basically obsolete in the grand scheme of power. But, laws definitely matter. Taxes, zoning, local regulations, those things absolutely dictate our daily lives. So how can the text argue that governments don't hold the real power?
Well, it's a really fair distinction to make. The text doesn't argue that governments, don't exist or that they don't perform administrative functions. It argues about the trajectory of power.
The trajectory.
Okay. Yeah, think of traditional government as just the visible layer of administration. They pave roads, they collect taxes, right?
Sure.
But policies swing back and forth, leaders change every few years. Yet the underlying global systems, the financial architectures, the data harvesting networks, the global flows of digital influence, those remain entirely untouched by whoever won the last midterm election.
Oh, wow. So the underlying operating system just keeps humming, regardless of which user is logged into the political terminal.
That is a great way to frame it. Historically, power was intrinsically linked to physical space. If you were an emperor and you wanted more power, you needed to conquer more land.
Right, because land gave you resources, agriculture, citizens to tax.
Exactly. Leverage required physical territory. But the text points out that we've witnessed this historic decoupling of leverage from geography. Influence has moved from land to networks.
Wait, from land to network?
Yeah, it's moved from deploying physical armies to deploying digital algorithms.
I see. Because to influence the world today, or to extract massive amounts of wealth and value, you don't actually need to physically cross a border or conquer a nation's land anymore.
You really don't. You don't need a supply chain of cargo ships if your product is a digital infrastructure that half the planet relies on to communicate,
Yeah.
You extract value without ever needing to occupy a physical space. The structures that hold the most leverage over human behavior today just simply do not care about physical maps.
Okay, I love the analogy here. It's like traditional political power is this loud, flashy magic trick meant to distract the audience, right? While all the real work is happening quietly backstage.
That's spot on.
But let me ask you this. If attention is the new territory, how is this land grab actually happening right in front of us? Because it doesn't feel like an invasion.
Right.
We aren't seeing troops on the streets. I have to play the skeptic for a second, because the text uses phrases like an undeclared war, which, that feels a bit heavy-handed.
It does sound intense. Yeah, because no algorithm is holding a gun to my head. If I choose to spend 3 hours scrolling through a heated debate online, isn't that just my own poor impulse control? How is an invisible empire exerting power over me in that scenario?
Well, what's fascinating here is how tempting it is to frame that as a personal failing. We are deeply, deeply attached to the idea of our own free will.
We definitely are.
But the text forces us to look at the actual mechanics of this new battlefield. The territory being conquered is human attention. And the war isn't being fought with bullets, it's being fought with A/B testing on a billion-person scale.
Oh man, okay, break that down for me. How does the testing actually act as a mechanism of control?
Well, let's look at the data points being harvested. It's not just about what you click on. That's a very outdated view of the internet.
It's way past that now.
Way past. The current architecture measures microhabits. It measures how many milliseconds you hover over a specific image before scrolling past it. It measures the speed of your thumb swipe.
The speed of my thumb swipe.
It really? Oh, absolutely. It tracks whether your pupils dilate if you're using a device with an advanced camera. It correlates the time of day you're most likely to linger on a post that makes you feel anxious versus a post that makes you feel validated.
So it is essentially mapping the psychological vulnerabilities of every single user.
Yes, exactly. It is building a predictive model of your nervous system.
That is wild.
And if the system's mathematical goal is to keep you engaged, and it learns that, say, content evoking a mild sense of injustice keeps you on the platform 14% longer than content that makes you happy.
They'll just feed me more injustice.
The system will systematically optimize your feed for injustice. It's not malicious, it's just terrifyingly efficient.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that brings up a quote from the text that absolutely stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
The author writes, "If you can shape what people believe, you never have to control what they do."
Yes. That concept is the absolute crux of this manifesto. It highlights exactly why brute force is a relic of the past.
Because using physical police or military to control a population is, well, it's expensive, it's incredibly messy, and it almost always sparks rebellion.
Right. But if you can construct the informational reality that a person lives inside of, they will police themselves.
They will, because they'll make the choices you want them to make, and they will fight tooth and nail to defend those choices, completely convinced that those choices originated in their own minds.
Exactly. I mean, we inherently like to think that our fears, our political passions, our core beliefs, we think they're deeply personal. They feel like our identity.
Yeah, we take so much pride in them. But, I mean, we like to think our fears and beliefs are deeply personal. But if they're being optimized, are we just living in a highly personalized echo chamber, engineered for efficiency?
We absolutely are. The text asks you to consider the really uncomfortable reality that those feelings are constantly being shaped. The architecture feeds you a steady drip of confirmation bias to make you feel secure.
And then what?
And then it periodically injects a spike of perceived threat, just to keep your nervous system engaged and reactive. You aren't just reading the news, you are being mathematically managed.
It is so unsettling to realize this architecture is operating around us. This feels like the ultimate tragic irony.
How so?
Because, I mean, the internet and these global networks, they were originally sold to us as the ultimate tools for human liberation. It was supposed to democratize information, shatter monopolies, set everyone free.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's certainly democratized access to information. But in doing so, it centralized the surveillance of that access to an unprecedented degree.
Right. We built a world where every digital action, every geographical movement, every financial transaction, all of it is recorded.
Data is not just a byproduct of our lives anymore. It is the core currency of the modern world.
And the text mentions that the entities controlling this data now understand humanity better than humanity understands itself. Really want to dive into the mechanism of how that creates what the author calls the illusion of choice.
Oh, that's a crucial part of the text.
Because we walk around every day feeling completely autonomous.
Yeah.
Right? We decide what videos to watch, what articles to read, what products to buy.
But the author challenges you to ask a very mechanical question. How many of those daily choices were truly yours, and how many were pre-selected for you?
Right. I think the best way to explain the mechanics of this is to think about going to a restaurant.
Okay, let's hear it.
So you walk in, you sit down, and you feel totally free to order absolutely anything on the menu. You pick the burger, and you think to yourself, I chose the burger. I exercised my free will.
Right.
But what you don't realize is that before you even walked in the door, the kitchen analyzed your biology, your recent sleep patterns, your microstressors from the workday, your historical caloric cravings.
Oh, wow.
And they used that data to print a custom menu just for you. They only put 3 options on the page. 3 options they mathematically calculated you would be unable to resist. You feel like you made a free choice, but the outcome was pre-selected by the system because the system hid the salad and the steak.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize algorithmic curation. I love that. Because the system presents you with a customized reality based on what it knows will trigger your specific engagement loop.
Exactly. You're just picking from what's there.
And you choose from those narrow parameters provided, which then validates the system's prediction. That gives it even more data to refine the next menu it hands you. It is a closed feedback loop of behavioral modification.
And the organizations running these loops, the text refers to them as empires without flags.
Yeah. When you look at a traditional globe, you see countries with defined borders colored in different shades. But the real geography of power lies in the tech infrastructures.
The servers, the algorithms.
The cloud computing networks, the platforms that span across all those borders simultaneously. These invisible empires have user bases that dwarf the populations of historical
I
empires.
really do.
They dictate the flow of commerce, they regulate human speech through their terms of service, and they negotiate directly with nation-states.
And they operate with zero friction. The source notes that this shift in power is happening exponentially faster than any of our traditional visible systems can handle.
I mean, think about the fundamental difference in speed. A legislative body meets, holds hearings, debates, and drafts a bill over the course of what, 2 or 3 years to regulate a specific technology.
If we're lucky.
Right. And in those same 3 years, a tech platform can deploy 10,000 iterative updates to its algorithm, completely shifting the cultural baseline of half the planet. By the time the law passes, it's regulating a ghost.
A ghost. Because the technology has already evolved way past the parameters of the legislation.
Exactly.
So the institutions we rely on to protect us are structurally outpaced. The text literally says that by the time you realize the rules of the world have changed, the new rules are already the permanent normal.
Which is why relying on traditional power structures to rein in these invisible empires is just a losing game. The architecture moves too fast.
Honestly, hearing all of this laid out, the predictive models, mapping our nervous systems, the empires without flags, the total illusion of choice, it is incredibly bleak.
It can definitely feel that way.
It sounds like we are just trapped in the matrix, functioning as predictable data points for a machine we can't control.
Yeah.
I mean, if invisible empires move faster than laws and dictate the reality we perceive, it is really easy to feel completely powerless. But the text explicitly provides a way out.
It does. It doesn't end on a note of technological determinism.
Right. So what does this all mean? How do we actually win this game?
Well, it is actually a very empowering conclusion, provided you are willing to do the work. The author shifts focus to talk about who actually wins in this newly arranged world. And the winners are not the traditional nations, and they aren't necessarily the people who code the algorithms either.
The winners are the individuals who understand the system,
Yes.
the people who recognize the architecture of the theater and adapt to it, rather than burying their heads in the sand and pretending we still live in a 20th century world.
Exactly. The text makes a firm point. In a world driven by invisible systems, ignorance is a profound disadvantage. If you don't know you're playing a game, you are mathematically guaranteed to lose it.
Mathematically guaranteed. That's a sobering thought.
The author argues that the greatest shift happening right now isn't external. It isn't happening in the halls of a Capitol building or in some server farm.
Where is it happening?
The most critical shift must happen within the individual's own mind. It's the transition from passive consumption to active observation.
Okay, I want to make this really concrete for the listener. Because abstract philosophy is great, but what does active observation actually look like on a random Tuesday morning when someone is just drinking their coffee and scrolling through their phone?
This raises an important question, and it requires what we might call an outrage audit.
An outreach audit. I like that.
Yeah, the text focuses heavily on the concept of awareness. So next time you're looking at a screen and you feel your blood pressure spike over a headline, or you feel a sudden surge of anxiety about a trending topic, you don't just react.
You pause.
You interrupt the physical dopamine loop by pausing and asking a really mechanical question. Who profits from me feeling angry right now?
Oh. So you map the financial or structural incentive behind your own emotion.
Precisely. Once you realize that your anger or your fear is literally paying for a server somewhere, that your emotional reaction is a successful metric on someone else's spreadsheet, the spell breaks.
Wow.
You recognize the transaction. You see that you are exchanging your finite peace of mind for their algorithmic ad revenue.
That is treating your attention like the incredibly valuable finite currency it actually is. Because when people first wake up to these invisible structures, the initial reaction is usually paranoia, like they want to throw their phone in a river and move to the woods.
Oh, absolutely.
But the text argues that true awareness is not fear. Awareness is clarity.
Clarity is seeing the board for what it is. You don't have to throw the phone in the river, but you do have to start treating the screen as a mirror of reality and start treating it as a highly curated menu designed to extract your attention. Clarity is the absolute foundation of reclaiming your agency.
Because control over your own attention means control over your own thoughts. Once you understand the system, you stop reacting to it blindly. You stop getting swept away by the optimized outrage in your feed.
Yeah, you see the machinery.
And because you see the machinery, you can finally start navigating it on your own terms. You transition from being a predictable data point to an active, sovereign participant in your own cognitive life.
It is a profound shift, going from feeling like a victim of the modern world to feeling like an observer of it.
To bring this all together for you listening, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started by unlearning the illusion that traditional governments and physical borders hold all the geopolitical cards, recognizing instead that loud politics often serve as a distraction from the silent systemic shifts in power. We explored how the battlefield moved from physical land into human psychology, where our fears and micro-habits are tracked and optimized by an invisible architecture of influence. We looked at the tech empires built on data that operate faster than the speed of law, creating the illusion of choice by pre-selecting our reality.
And then the way out.
Exactly. Finally, we arrived at the text's antidote, reclaiming your personal agency through the clarity of an outrage audit, mastering your own attention instead of letting the algorithm master you.
It really changes the way you look at every screen in your house. But before we wrap up, I want to leave a listener with one final lingering thought to explore on their own.
Go ahead.
We've talked extensively about how these invisible systems have mastered the art of optimizing our beliefs based on our historical data. But if the algorithm is constantly feeding us what it mathematically knows we already agree with, or what will predictably trigger us, what happens to human creativity and cultural progress?
Oh, that's a huge question.
What happens to society when the system decides that giving us something genuinely new or deeply challenging is no longer mathematically efficient for keeping our attention?
We become a culture permanently trapped in a feedback loop of its own past preferences. If everything is just a reflection of what we already clicked on, how do we ever stumble into a new idea? That is a massive, slightly terrifying question to sit with.
It is.
But remember the core message the source provided. Recognizing the trap is the first step to stepping around it. Seeing the architecture is not the end of your control. It is the beginning of your awareness. Thank you for diving deep with us into the hidden mechanics of the modern world.